Consider a group that's committed to putting partisan politics aside in order to break the gridlock and get a sound budget in place. That's exactly what No Labels is trying to do. The group has garnered the support and membership from 63 lawmakers and is chaired this year by Democratic Senator Joe Manchin and former Republican presidential candidate Jon Huntsman. Dan Arbess, the partner at private equity giant Perella Weinberg, hosted Governor Huntsman at his home in New York last night to spread the message of No Labels. Governor Dan, great to see you here in our studio this morning.
Thanks, Betty.
Governor, let me start with you, because as I mentioned, you have 63 lawmakers signed on. You want to get to 100 by the end of this year?
What a big deal that would be. First of all, I want to thank Dan for hosting us last night. He's one of the most respected people on Wall Street, and for him to open his home as he did, it just shows that the message of creating a culture that speaks to problem solving is catching on. It doesn't matter whether you're Republican or Democrat. We've got to get the work of the country done. And today it becomes impossible because of the great divide that exists. There's no venue in which Republicans and Democrats can actually meet to talk about the issues of the day.
Well, without getting criticized by their own parties in many ways.
You have to incentivize problem solving, because otherwise you drift toward the extremes, because that's where the money is and that's where the airtime is on the cable programs. So this No Labels movement, nolabels.org for those who are interested, is the one movement in this country that is actually working to create a culture in Washington that speaks to problem solving. Republicans and Democrats from the Senate, from the House of Representatives, banding together in a problem solvers caucus, which now numbers 63. We think will be 100 by the end of the year, to move.
And that would be critical mass for you.
Well, we'll see where the marketplace goes, but I think based on what many are hearing from their constituents at home, you know, many sent members of Congress back 4 or 5, 6 years ago to blow up the culture in Washington, to stymie, to obfuscate, to ensure that nothing got done. And they succeeded. And here we are without even a budget, for heaven's sake, after 3 or 4 cycles. So I think the voices from the grassroots are going to say, put some of the pieces back together. We've got to get some work of the people done, like tax reform, like energy policy, like immigration policy. Those are just good for America, regardless of your political affiliation.
Dan, how did you get involved in No Labels?
So I followed Governor Huntsman during the presidential primary process last year, during the election. We got to know each other fairly well, and we've corresponded on a pretty continual basis.
But what was it about the governor that appealed to you?
Okay.
Among all the candidates?
What appealed to me about the governor during the presidential primary process, and this is really very important, is the government is a rare public servant who has invested his whole life but has worked across party lines. He was a 2-term governor of Utah, served 2 Republican administrations, and then he became U.S. ambassador to China in the Obama administration. He came back from China to become involved in the presidential process last year, and I was immediately taken by his willingness to cross party lines, to focus on giving to the country and doing what he thought was right without being stuck in the strictures and the dogma, frankly, of the partisan discussions that have been going on.
Which governor cost you the primary, though?
Well, it was problematic in a period of heightened partisanship. But you have to be who you are. But here's the important part, because you mentioned that Joe Manchin is my co-chair, the senator from West Virginia, and a great...
Who's been out on the forefront with gun control. Which
is a great example with Senator Toomey of a Republican and a Democrat coming together to find a sane solution to a very important issue. Joe and I were elected governors together about 10 years ago. As a governor, you have to solve problems for your people. You can't hide, you can't duck, you can't point fingers of blame. You have to deliver. If you don't deliver, you get run out of office. It's kind of a very liberating culture in which to reside. Joe then went from the governorship, where we'd worked together, into the Senate and found that just the opposite existed in terms of the culture. There was no way to kind of come together and problem solve around the issues of the day. So he was attracted to No Labels, founded by Nancy Jacobson. He then came to me and said, will you be my co-chair? And together we thought, we've lived in a culture of problem solving as governor. There's no reason why we can't work on changing the culture.
Why you can't solve the problems.
The cultures change all the time in D.C. And infuse it with a sense of problem solving, getting the work of the American people done. But in order to get there, you have to have some equity in the game. You have to have a caucus of serious-minded Republicans and Democrats.
Right. But,
soon to be 100.
Well, Dan, when you go down to Washington, and you've been down to Washington under no labels, do the lawmakers pay more attention to you? Do their ears perk up more because they know you're from Wall Street?
Well, lawmakers are always happy to talk to people from Wall Street. Wall Street has its own agenda. We know, what the business community in general is looking for is some certainty on taxation and regulation. It's said all the time. What I thought was really interesting about the opportunity to see the No Label group working was they checked their calcified partisan positions at the door. Right, we're in a state of perpetual gridlock in Washington these days, where it's very, very difficult for legislators to get things done. And I think your average congressional representative is becoming very, very frustrated because he's devoted his life to trying to help the country, and he's finding it very difficult to accomplish anything. We have to stop the process in Washington where we get ridiculous outcomes that are in nobody's interest, like, for example, the furloughing of air traffic controllers,
right,
which Congress had to very quickly reverse. The whole process of the fiscal cliff leading to the sequestration, which was supposed to be set up as a gun to Congress's head to actually get some budgetary progress accomplished, was just a complete disaster. And I think a growing number of our representatives understand that and want to say, look, let's get out of the framework of more taxing and more spending on the one hand, or more austerity, which is a negative drag on the economy at this particular time when the economy is as weak as possible, on the other, and let's find common ground. What's the common ground? Make government work for us. Make government more efficient. Everyone can agree on getting more for the government's money in defense and health care, on focusing on efficiency, and I think this is where No Labels is going to make a real impact.
Well, the problem, and Governor, you can address this, that people say is why we can't get anything done, and lawmakers feel like they're held hostage in many ways to their own party's politics, is because of the campaign cycle. You're always campaigning. You never have enough time, or not even enough time. You don't have enough freedom, essentially, to be able to work on the issues that can generate support among both party lines. You're too busy campaigning and making sure you get the vote the next time around.
Well, there are a lot of things that drive partisanship. And listen, today's problem isn't one of ideology, because we all have a different worldview. We sit around a table. We're all informed by different data points and different experiences in life. The problem is extreme partisanship, which drives people away from the negotiating table. So consequently, deals don't get done. And my fear is...
So No Labels gives them a cover?
Well, we give them a venue. We give them a reason to meet.
Okay.
We give them, in a sense, cover. Okay. We create the environment which leads to a cultural shift in D.C. whose focus is problem solving. So let's just start with the basics. I mean, there are a lot of things that drive partisanship, whether it's too much money in politics, whether it's, to my mind, term limits would be a very good thing for this country, for Congress, and how we draw the boundaries for the congressional districts, where you've got 70% of the districts today that are predictably red or blue.
Yeah.
Those are all big issues, but you got to start with the basics, and the basics can really be done when you create this caucus of doers, which has never been done before. And if you can associate that with a grassroots effort of 1 million activists, which we're going to have by the end of the year, in every congressional district around the country, that's real leverage in the game.
No budget, no pay was a part of No Labels, and in some form it finally did get passed, and the president signed it earlier this year. So what's the next on the priority list for No Labels? Well,
next on the priority list would be, and if you talk to Senator Manchin, he would say, members of Congress spend more time traveling to and from their districts than they do in Washington actually getting the work of the people done. So why don't we restructure the work month for Congress, as opposed to two and a half days in D.C. and the rest of it sort of traveling or at home? How about 3 weeks in Washington, Monday through Friday, working on the issues that really do matter, and then 1 week at home with your constituents? Just restructure the calendar. A simple thing like that would allow for a better flow, a better rhythm in terms of problem solving and getting the work of the people done. So we're talking more about structural changes as opposed to
policy
issues of the day. Those will follow. And the people duly elected by the electorates in this country, they know what issues to put on the table, but they just don't have the venue or the modality by which to meet. So we're solving that one for them.
Governor, thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Betty. Pleasure to be with you.
Jon Huntsman, and of course, Dan Arbess with Perella Weinberg. Thank you very much.